none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Presentations.
Item 4.08, 2019 Sunrise River WMO report. Leon Major, East Bethel SR WMO Citizen Representative will provide a report and an update to council on the future impact of any changes to the funding formula for the WMO JPA agreement. This matter has been discussed in a meeting we had in August in our previous work meeting and in a meeting that Tim Harrington and I attended in October at the city of Ham Lake. So at this time, Leon, the floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening, council members. I'm going to do a very short update on just what the WMO is, WMDs are and stuff, and then we'll get right to the issue.
Okay.
First of all, the Sunrise is made up of the 4 communities: Columbus, East Bethel, Ham Lake, and Linwood. And the next slide addresses one item, which I don't think is a problem, but I'm going to bring it up because Ham Lake brings it up every few years. The council has addressed this before, and that's a boundary change. If you look at the second bullet there, it explains that the watersheds were put together on hydrology boundaries, not on city boundaries. And as a result of that, Ham Lake got divided into 3 different watersheds. And later on in the presentation, I'll show you the picture of how much of Ham Lake is in each of the 3 watersheds. And so Ham Lake would like to eliminate the boundary, or move the boundary between them and the Sunrise River watershed, so that they only have to deal with 2 different watersheds instead of 3. The amount of the south side of the west basin of Coon Lake specifically is the area of Ham Lake that is in the Sunrise. And to change that boundary would end up having 2 different watersheds managing that part of Coon Lake, which is not very practical. And I seriously doubt if the state organization that makes the decisions on is responsible for the implementation of the watersheds is the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Their acronym is usually referred to as BOWSR. And Ham Lake, this council's already documented that they're not in favor of the boundary change. In previous years that this has come up, Sunrise is not in favor of it, and the ball is in Ham Lake's court, and they haven't done anything in previous years. If they wanted to, they could elevate this to the state level and go to BOWSR with it. They never have. And so even though it's come up again this year, I don't think it's probably worth anybody's time. It's, like I say, we've taken enough time with the different organizations on it, and if they want to take it farther, that's up to them. The ball's in their court. That's the one issue. At the work session, At the work session, there was a discussion on Upper Rum moving some of the budgets are basically in 2 parts. They have the administrative part, and then they have the projects. Administrative part is called the operating part, and the budget or the actual projects are called non-operating. The operating is like an administrative part. And there's the discussions are going back and forth on which line items belong under administrative or operating, and which items belong under project. And the Upper Rum has made some changes. The Sunrise has looked at it and haven't made any changes. When you get the budgets for 2021, you will be able to go through those line items. If you got any questions, then they can be worked. But the representatives from all 4 communities have agreed on which items fall under each of the 2 categories. And so that's what you're going to be looking at. And so I don't think there's any reason for us to spend any time on that.
So did they change it in the budget then?
The Upper Rum moved two of their items out of the operating and into the project or non-operating funds. The Sunrise went through their list and they did not make any changes. And all four communities, representatives on the board did agree with the no changes on the Sunrise. And I assume the Upper Rum had agreement with their members also on the two changes that they did make. Now we get to what is an issue. The administrative end or the operating end is divided equally financially between the four member communities. So it's split four ways evenly. The projects are split based on the tax base that each of the community has within the Sunrise boundaries and the surface area that each of the four member communities have within the Sunrise. And so you end up with a different formula to figure out how much each of the four member communities pay for the administrative and how much each of the four communities pay for the projects. And Ham Lake and Columbus, you haven't heard from Columbus yet, but I understand that they are going to go along with Ham Lake on this one. And they want to have the administrative or the operating expenses split using the same formula that you use for the projects. And we will get to what that means financially to you. And the rest of the presentation is primarily on this issue. This is the only kind of the showstopper. A little background on the WMO. Minnesota requires that you do have either a watershed management district, which gets their finances just like the school district does, or the Lake District does, and that is by a separate line item on the property taxes. The WMO gets its finances through a joint powers agreement between its member communities. 34 years ago, way before our time, it was decided that this area was going to be managed with two WMOs, one for the Upper Rum and one for the Sunrise. And so the joint powers agreement was drawn up between the four communities and how they were going to finance these two organizations. Since that, and the Sunrise or the Upper Rum have nothing to do with this. They don't have sign-off on it. They can provide input to it, but it's really a community document. And it's really the responsibility of the four communities to work that document, keep it updated, to make changes to it. And the JPA, Joint Powers Agreement, did have only, in the 34 years, only had one change that I could find. And that was in '01. And that was to change when the finances are put into the budget twice a year for the watershed. The JPA's got a lot of things in there that are probably wrong. You might want to consider getting it updated. The JPA says that all four communities have to have 100% agreement between the four communities on the budget. The JPA does not address what happens if you don't have all four communities in agreement. The JPA doesn't talk about arbitration and who does it or anything like that. That's one of the areas you might want to look at. Okay, the next. As I stated earlier, the JPA is strictly the responsibility of the four communities. If you guys can't get your act together and get an agreement on this issue, then you can elevate it to the state level. And Bowser is the organization that oversees that put the watershed requirements on everybody, and then they, the ones that we report to annually, they're the ones that have approval on what we do. They're the ones that finance most of our projects. Something, something to think about if you decide that there's administrative functions are in the 3 different categories. There's the operating expenses, the financing of it, which we've been talking about. They also have the representation on the board. Each of the communities have equal representation. They each have 2. And as far as the voting on the projects and where the money goes and stuff, each of the communities have equal representation on that also. So question will come up, if you do change how it gets financed, does that change how the representation goes, and does that change how the voting goes? This next slide shows you the Ham Lake, and it shows you how much of Ham Lake is in the Upper Rum and how much of the Ham Lake is in the Sunrise. And like I said, the boundaries are based on the hydrology, water flow, and they're saying that the water flow has to be managed as one part. You can't split it up. And so you can see where they're coming from, but you can understand where the Board of Water and Bowser is coming from also. Oh, you did do this one, good. And this is the one you've probably been waiting for. This shows the estimated cost to you. The very top table is that if there are no changes in the JPA and you continue down the path you're going, now the 2020 budget has already been approved. What you're going to be working on in the next, May, March, April, May, June, is going to be the 2021 budget. And so these numbers were taken out of our 10-year plan for the following 9 years. And the top one showed you with no changes how the money gets divided between the 4 communities. The second table down shows you what happens with the changes that are being proposed. And the bottom table shows you the difference. And as you can see, the differences amount to very little for East Bethel, and that basically Columbus, it saves about $1,000 a year, $1,120 to be exact. East Bethel pays an extra $1,073 a year, and the big savings is with Ham Lake, which is close to $3,000 a year, and the big hit for Linwood is about the same as what Ham Lake saves. So if you look all the way over to the right on the bottom table on the right-hand side, you see that you're talking in 9 years, you're talking a $9,000 difference to you. But the big difference is Linwood and Columbus. Now you're only looking at half a picture, you're not looking at the Upper Rum. The Upper Rum has about the same budget, $50,000, but the division will be different between the 4 cities. I was not able to get a 9-year layout here to show you exactly what that means to you financially. So how you want to proceed to resolve this difference, and what do you want to do with it?
Leon, let me ask this first. You state that if the JPA members cannot agree on the content or propose changes to the GPA,
I've been told this at least by the Columbus people.
Okay. Well, here's my question. The JPA is a legal document. I agree if there's a change that wants to be done to it, everyone has to agree to the change.
Yes.
But if someone doesn't, if not everyone can agree to the change just doesn't happen.
And then the watershed does not get financed.
No,
Oh.
the change doesn't happen. I mean,
Okay.
if a city makes a decision not to fund their responsibilities, that's their city's decision not to fund it. They don't get out of the JPA just because they want to change and no one else wants to change. It's not how agreements work, but
Okay, so you're telling me that if both Columbus and Ham Lake want to change the JPA to this new formula, and if East Bethel is not in favor of the changing to the new formula, it's not going to happen, and they are legally bound to sign off on the budget using the old formulas?
they have an agreement.
They have an
And they
agreement.
comment on the budget.
Mhm.
So, I mean, their qualm is with the way that part of the budget is calculated. That's, you know,
And
when the
that-
agreements were drafted, that was written into the agreement. I understand they want to change the agreement.
And that's between you and them, and if you say you don't want to change the agreement, it doesn't get changed. That's what you're telling me.
That's my view on it. I don't know how else.
Is there any
I agree.
expiration or renewal dates?
There's nothing about there's nothing in there about how to do revisions or frequency or anything.
It's just.
So you've got a legal document that ties them to this, and to change that legal document requires your approval.
Right.
I like what I hear.
Well, unless our city attorney wants to comment differently, I mean, we've signed an agreement, right?
Mr. Mayor, I'd be hesitant to comment on it without actually seeing the joint powers agreement, but there should be measures in there articulating amendments to it, how it's amended, whether or not it can be amended, what the votes would be in order to do it. So, you know, it should all be within the four corners of the document if there's a process to amend it, how it should be.
Jack, have we looked at in detail the
No,
process?
no, we haven't, and I would suggest that we forward that to our city attorney for review and comment.
Okay.
I understand there isn't a how to amend it part in that JPA, but I haven't looked at it. I was just told that.
Okay.
I can't imagine Linwood would be agreeing to this either, so it's like 2-2.
Yes.
Yeah, this issue's come up in the past years, and I think, was it last year, we just talked about that, and council was pretty clear that, you know, and it's not just not wanting to change because it's gonna increase the levy on East Bethel. It's a fact that the way that's written makes sense, and that's what's fair, is there's certain base expenses that you're a member of, and you have to share in those base expenses. If we didn't have any expenditures from a discretionary expenditures, we just had operating expenses, why should one member pay less than another? Because they have to be in this, they agreed to be in this, you know, this association, so.
So if Ham Lake and Columbus does not approve our budget and we submit the budget as per the JPA, then who is the policing force, or how does that proceed then?
I don't know.
I think that would be an answer that would have to be determined by our city attorney or some legal opinion.
Okay, and Sunrise is out of the picture then. It's strictly between the legal opinion between the four communities and their lawyers.
Well, I think we've been approached by the Ham Lake attorney in the past on this, haven't we?
Only by the Ham Lake city engineer and the Ham Lake city administrator.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
How long ago was that?
The first request came back in the summer, and then we had a meeting regarding the Upper Rum recategorization of certain cost items in October that Tim and I attended, and Ham Lake expressed what their concerns were. All the members were there. It was just a discussion and information only. We had a work meeting that we discussed, I believe, at our last work meeting, and discussed this, and I think the consensus of our council was that we weren't in favor of changing anything for either the Upper Rum or the Sunrise.
Right.
So my understanding from this is they're looking to change where a budget item is located, is that not correct?
No,
Whether it
it's-
is operating or non-operating expenses?
No, right now, the operating expenses are split equally 4 ways.
Right,
The non-operating expenses are split by based
Unique-
on
unique
market and
percentages.
size of the city.
right, but what I'm understanding, at least what I've heard, and I could be wrong, and maybe, Tim, you could clarify, is that they're looking to change some line items to go from non-operating expenses to operating expenses, is that correct?
I think that's the upper room that's
That's the
proposing
upper
that.
room.
Ah,
And
thank
the
you.
upper room had agreed and moved 2 of their operating expense line items down to the non-operating group.
Okay, then I,
And
My apologies.
Okay.
that's been done with and that's over with.
okay.
Okay.
Say, Leon, can you just touch on this tax district so people understand that, if this, the Sunrise would go away, that, they're in for a rude awakening if we went to a tax district?
I don't want to, if you give it to Bowser, I don't know, we could talk about the what if, what Bowser would do. I don't know if it's a good use of time or not, but there is always the option, they could change it to WMD and forget about the JPA and just run it as a line item on the property taxes. If they were to change it to a WMD, that, instead of paying the 50,000, it wouldn't be coming out of your general fund. It would be coming directly, from the property taxes as a separate line item. And that would make, like Ham Lake would like that, But your residents are gonna be paying a lot more. I know we got neighbors to the south and east where they're talking $5 to $7 million for WMDs, and you're paying $50,000 for a WMO. And there are 2 WMDs in Washington County that have been made aware of. They're running a budget around $2 million. So WMDs do cost a lot more than the WMOs. Maybe it doesn't, and it might reduce what you pay out of your general fund, but to your individual residents, it costs a lot more. Now, you get more for the money, but I think that we've got a lot of leverage, and we've got some pretty big projects going with a lot of money that we got coming in with 10% matching and stuff. And so you're doing a good job with the 50,000. And if you go to a WMD, then you're talking full-time people. You're talking offices and vehicles and all sorts of stuff. And a board of professionals, not amateurs like we are, I guess.
Didn't Ham Lake a year or 2 ago consider going or converting theirs to the Coon Creek to WMD?
They were proposing, that's when they proposed that boundary change to be incorporated all of Ham Lake in the Coon Creek Water District.
Okay,
And we discussed that, and we sent a recommendation that we were opposed to that.
okay. So I would think those residents in Ham Lake that live in that piece of Ham Lake that's part of Sunrise and Upper Rum would be very interested in knowing if their city wants to push them into a WMD, which is gonna triple their taxes on it.
It is
so.
going to raise their taxes a lot, yes.
So,
There's another argument here, though, in that all of the Ham Lake people are paying into the general fund. And then the people that are in Coon Lake receive the benefits from it. Well, how do I put it? The people that are paying directly to Coon Creek are also paying to the general fund, which is money used for the Sunrise.
Well, that's how,
It's a very small amount, I know.
well, it's up to how the city wants to bill their residents. for
That's
it.
right.
That's up to their city.
That's up to the city, and I understand Columbus has addressed that problem and solved it, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of the arguments that have used in the past.
Is there more discussion? Is there more meetings coming up with them on this, or?
No, I think the purpose of this is to advise us, so we will be getting the budgets for both the Sunrise and the Upper Rum here within the next couple of months for our approval and review, and it's to see what we need to do about getting those approved. I'll submit the joint powers agreement for both organizations to the city attorney for review, so we can get some comment on that, so we can see how we need to proceed in terms of if we approve the budgets and the others don't, what our course of action is.
Okay.
And we do have the two communities that say they're not going to approve it, but until we get it in front of them, we won't know that, you know.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
great. Thanks, Leon. Hey, our budget presentation for 2020.
Item 4B, 2020 budget, public comment period, and levy resolutions. Minnesota statute 275.065 requires cities to conduct a public comment period where residents are offered the opportunity to provide input to city council on proposed budgets and tax levies. The state requires that each city announce the date, time, and place of the meeting where residents can provide city council feedback on the proposed budget and levies. The date selected must be done at the meeting when the city council adopts the preliminary budget and levy in September. This meeting date is also listed on the parcel-specific notices for proposed 2020 taxes that taxpayers received in November from Anoka County. Council directed that December the 9th, 2019 is a regular meeting for this opportunity. Staff recommends that council open the floor for public comment on the 2020 budget and tax levies, and then at the conclusion of the comment period, consider the adoption of the general fund budget and levy, the EDA levy, and the HRA levy, with the motions as presented in the recommendations of this report. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mike Jaworski, our finance director, to give a review of the proposed 2020 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I just have a short presentation going over the 2020 budget and levy. Again, the City of East Bethel has a year-long budget process that commences on January 1st of each year when the budget model is created. The budget model chronicles the prior 2 years' activity, the current year's budget, and the next year's budget that is being considered for approval. Embedded in the model are updates to salary benefit line items and debt service requirements for the 2020 budget. From there, the city has a series of meetings, a finance committee meeting, department head meetings, and council meetings where the budget is discussed and modified. The objective of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of the 2020 budget and allow public input following the review. Before we get into the budget, I wanted to go over a few financial highlights from the past year. Looking at the city's most current year completed, we note that revenues came in at 103% of budget and expenditures came in at 97% of the budget. This illustrates that our budget process and modeling does a good job in capturing actual activity that occurs. The City of East Bethel has a formal fund balance policy that states the city should maintain a minimum of 40% of next year's budgeted general fund expenditures as its fund balance. The city had a fund balance of roughly $3.1 million at the end of 2018, or 53% of the 2019 budget. The city received their latest bond rating in December 2018, which was AA2 or very strong. The city has approved the union contract through 2022. And finally, TIF 1-1 is projected to be satisfied in 2020, which will put roughly $4 million in taxable market value on the property tax rolls in future years. Again, there are two primary ways one could analyze the city budget. One is by department, and the other is by groupings for personnel costs, contracted services, supplies, and other. The city's personnel costs account for roughly 40% of the general fund budget. For 2020, the mayor, council, and committee stipends are proposed to remain unchanged. The 2020 budget has 20 full-time employees, 10 in administration, 9 in public works, and 1 in the fire department. Of those employees, 10 are represented by a union. For 2020, salaries are proposed to have a 2.75% cost of living increase. The cafeteria contribution for benefits is also proposed to be increased from $1,100 to $1,200 per month. And as for benchmarking those increases, the average inflation rate as measured by the Consumer Price Index was roughly 2.1% for 2018. The city also budgets for 35 paid-on-call firefighters, 1 part-time cable technician, and 2 seasonal public works employees. A summary of the city's contracted service budgets for 2020 show the police contract is budgeted to increase by $40,800 or 4%. The city assessor contract is budgeted to increase by $3,000 or 5%. The city attorney contract is budgeted to increase by $5,000 or 4%. And given 2020 is an election year, the budget for this classification is budgeted to increase by $11,000. Internal transfers for street capital is budgeted increased by $25,000 and the park capital transfer by $5,000. And again, now just looking at the budget in a little different way, in governmental accounting, we summarize the budget into specific program areas. The general government classification captures all expenses involved with city governance, city council, city administration, finance, legal, and elections. This classification is budgeted increased by 4% from $1,079,500 in 2019 to $1,124,400 in 2020. The Community Development Department classification captures all expenses involved with planning, zoning, and building inspections. This classification is budgeted increased by 2% from $589,700 in 2019 to $602,900 in 2020. The public safety classification captures all expenses involved with police and fire protection. This classification is budgeted to increase by 5% from $1,822,900 in 2019 to $1,917,900 in 2020. Engineering expenses are budgeted to remain the same in 2020 and are budgeted at $40,000. The Public Works classification captures all expenses involved with street maintenance and park maintenance. The Public Works classification is budgeted to increase by 5% from $1,378,400 in 2019 to $1,440,600 in 2020. Transfers to other funds include transfers to street, building, and park capital, and is budgeted to increase by 5% from $580,000 in 2019 to $610,000 in 2020. Again, then, total revenue in all general fund classification is proposed to increase from $5,495,500 to $5,740,800 or 4%. Total expenditures in the general fund are budgeted to increase at the same rate. Again, the components that make up that $5,740,800 in revenue are cable franchise fees, liquor and tobacco licenses, building inspection permit revenue, state aids for streets and other, fines and forfeits, intergovernmental charges, cemetery revenue, tower lease revenue, gambling tax revenue, interest earnings, and of course, property taxes. The city receives roughly 80% of their general fund revenue from property taxes, which is illustrated on this graph. Shifting gears a little bit into our debt service fund and our debt service levy, the city will have 4 outstanding bond issues at the end of 2019 with principal balances of roughly $17.8 million in total. Each year, the city pays interest and principal on each of these bonds. These annual principal and interest payments follow a strict schedule that was determined when the initial bond sale occurred. The city also pays fiscal agent fees for each of these issues, which is reflected in the budget. The budget reflects a small decrease from 2019 to 2020, or from $1,226,985 to $1,220,585. Again, now when we take a look at the levies to fund our budgets, the general fund levy is proposed to increase by 3% from $4,466,500 to $4,607,300. And in order to fund our debt service, our levy for the debt service levy is projected to increase by 1% from $1,187,500 to $1,202,500. And then when we add both of those levies together, that gives us the total city levy, which then is proposed to increase by 2.8% from $5,654,000 in 2019 then to the 2020 total levy amount of $5,809,800. The other levying authorities within the city are its Economic Development Authority and the Housing Redevelopment Authority. The goals of the EDA are to encourage and redevelopment activities, achieve commercial development, and encourage development of housing within the city. The EDA levy is proposed to remain the same at $113,500 for 2020. The East Bethel Housing and Redevelopment Authority's purpose is to provide a sufficient supply of adequate, safe, and sanitary dwellings and address substandard, slum, or blighted areas existing within the city. The HRA levy is proposed to increase from $56,600 in 2019 to $62,600 in 2020. Again, everyone should have now received their 2020 proposed tax statement in the mail. A couple of reminders that your overall tax decrease is controlled by a number of factors. Your taxable market value increase in relation to the entire city, the city levy, the county levy, and the school district levy. With that, the City Council will welcome any public input on the budget. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Is there anyone here tonight to talk with council about the proposed 2020 city budget? If not, we'll close that hearing. We have some resolutions. Is there any discussion before we go ahead with resolutions on what Mike presented? I have a quick question. On your pie chart, you showed that property tax represents 80% of the revenue. Do we know how the breakdown is between residential and commercial?
Not offhand, but that's something I could provide you.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see what the difference is.
It's definitely in one of my spreadsheets that I have, so I can.
Just for general numbers, the last time that I looked at that, if you break it down to property tax, residential properties account for about 80% of that, with the balance being brought up by agricultural, industrial, and commercial. So residential properties bear the.
80% of that 80%?
That's correct.
Okay. I was just curious. Okay, with that, is there a motion on the first resolution?
I'll make a motion for approval of Resolution 2019-60, setting the final property tax levy and budget for 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Discussion. Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Next resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-61, setting the final 2020 EDA levy and budget.
Second.
Motion made and second. Discussion. Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes.
And I'll make a motion for approval of Resolution 2019-62, setting the final 2020 HRA levy and budget.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made and second. Discussion.
I have a question on this one. Why does this one have such a large increase? Isn't it like 11% increase or something like that? I'm just curious as to why.
Percentage-wise, it's large. Dollar-wise, it's $6,000.
I know.
That's to build that HRA fund back up. It was substantially more than that. We do anticipate having more HRA projects in the future, and this would provide us the ability to fund some of
Okay.
those with the additional monies.
Thank you.
For general information, we have to have an active HRA, or it'll be taken by the county and we're subject to them and their levies.
I was just wondering why it was going up. That's all.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. On to consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion?
I'd like item C pulled, please.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Suzanne, item C.
I just have a question on it because there was no explanation or anything in the packet regarding it, and I just would like some background information.
When this TIF district was set up, and this is for the one for aggressive hydraulics, there's a certain amount of funds that were allocated there for the administration, monitoring, and TIF reporting. These comes from the actual TIF tax increment and not from any city general funds. And we draw down on those each year to cover our administration, monitoring, and reporting costs for the TIF district that are required by law.
Okay, so is there a dollar amount attached to this,
Yeah,
or?
it'd be a $1,300 transfer from the fund that was originally set up at $41,000. And
Okay.
that'll be for this year. And as Mike pointed out, next year, this TIF district will be fully paid off and all this property will go completely and fully on the tax rolls.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve item C on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion is made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none to the motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. No new business. On to department reports. Jack?
Item 7G1, consider approval of the proposed 2020 fee schedule. Staff annually reviews the city fee schedule in order to ensure that revenues cover the cost of providing services. Staff has reviewed and updated the attached fee schedule for 2020. Changes from the previous version are noted in red in your packet. Recommended utility operation fees reflect increases in our operating cost and Met Council flow charges. Tier adjustments are recommended to closer approximate the consumption of lower volume users and provide a lower rate for these customers. Recommended planning and zoning fee changes are proposed to equalize costs for similar inspection activities within this department. Proposed escrow increases are offered to ensure that there are adequate funds to cover legal and engineering consultation and that the work is completed by the permit holder. Currently, there are instances where it's less expensive to forfeit the escrow fee than it is to perform the work. Adoption of the new escrow fees will provide financial incentives primarily for the completion of driveway and seeding and sodding requirements for both new and code-required work. Recommended building department fee changes are proposed to adopt the 2015 IBC square foot construction cost for permit valuation determinations, to standardize the permit cost for HVAC and siding permits, and to increase the mobile home inspection fee to cover the cost of multiple inspections for this item. In analyzing the building department, we find that the city's fees for a $2,000 new single-family home total $3,500, or 1.8% of construction costs for permits on non-sewered lots, and up to $11,900, or 6% of construction costs for permits on lots served by municipal utilities. These numbers are important because if you recall, about a year ago, there was quite a controversy that some cities were claimed to be making lots of money from their building department fees, and this was actually brought before the legislature. Several of our surrounding cities were summoned and actually testified before the legislature, and some cities were charging up to 25–30% of construction costs for fee charges. So as you can see on residential construction, our fees are very much in line and very reasonable in comparison with all the other ones in the metro area. Fees are calculated to only cover the cost of the application process, staff review, inspection, and other associated expenses related to rental, land use, building, and fire code permits. Through November 30th, 2019, expenses in the building department totaled $287,478, and fees received were $312,318. It's projected that the end of year 2019 will result in cost of $308,000 and income of $330,000, or a 7.1% difference between income and revenues. From a budgeting standpoint, this represents an acceptable variation between income and expenses. Staff recommends that council consider the adoption of the 2020 fee schedule and that should be the 2019 or the 2015 IBC valuation schedule as exhibited in attachment 1.
Is there a motion to the resolution?
Move for approval of the proposed 2020 fee schedule.
It's in a form of a resolution.
Yes, that would be,
The 2019-63?
yes.
Yes.
Move for approval of resolution 2019-63, adopting the 2020 fee schedule.
Okay. Is there a second motion?
Second.
Motion made, second, discussion.
I think some of these are way too much for increases. I think that especially some of these escrow, not, the escrows, the IUPs, and the ones that are going to our individual residents that come up here, I think that the city staff, I feel like the city staff is trying to be paid twice for doing their job. They get paid by the taxpayers for their wages, and now to do their job, you want more money. I think I thought they were too high in the first place, and now you guys want to increase them some more, and I think it's too much for the individual residence ones. I'm not talking about the building construction and all those don't bother me, but the ones that are charging residents to come up and file to have siding and to have a roof and to get an IUP and a CUP, all those increases, I'm not in favor of any of them.
Well, actually, those fees go to fund the one-time cost of city staff time. They're part of our budget and income revenues for those departments. The escrows, if the work is completed, people get those funds back. The reason we're recommending certain escrow fee increases is we're finding we're having to go and get more legal and more engineering consultation. And this way we don't have to go back to the person that filed the application and ask them for more money because their escrow amounts exceeded what our consulting fees were. And also it encourages those, especially contractors, to complete work rather than forfeiting the escrow fee and leaving the work uncompleted. And we have compared our fees with neighboring cities and found ours to be in line with what is customarily charged throughout the North Metro and in the city of Cambridge and Isanti.
So is it, Jack, in simplest terms, like for the building department, because we're talking about that, the building department is funded from two sources. It's funded from general levy and then also funded through the building permits.
It's essentially funded through building permits, and if there's a shortfall, then it's funded through general levy.
Okay.
Now, from 2006 to 2013, that department was heavily subsidized by the general fund.
Right.
Because it only generated somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $100,000 a year.
So the majority is generated from the building permits.
That's correct.
And so I think the philosophy there is the fact that the ones who are benefiting from the service, the building permits, things like that, are the ones that should pay it, the users, basically user fee, as opposed to the general public coming out of general levy. Because if we don't have the building permits, as Jack, or building permit revenue, then we gotta make up for it with the general levy, which comes out of everyone's pockets, rather than the person getting a permit, so.
And it's the same way with the CUPs and IUPs. If we lessen those fees, then we probably have to increase the general levy to account for that decrease in revenue for the community development department.
So I just want to bring it up, and that's how these things are funny. We can talk about if there's certain things that you think specifically, you disagree with, we can talk about that. Did we go through this on a work meeting? I can't remember if we did or not, the fee changes.
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. So was there a specific one you want to talk about, Suzanne, or?
Well, I just think, and all of these fees that go to, and I'll take out my escrow complaint, but all the other permits are, I feel are too high. And you have new ones, a new CUP, new fees in escrow, $500 plus consulting fee for a CUP. And then you have a CUP amendment, $300 plus consulting fee and a $500 escrow. We live in this town where people cannot afford this. We have a lot of seniors, a lot of older people who live on fixed income. A lot of people don't work. A lot of people retired and get $1,200 or $1,500 a month, not the $4,000 or $8,000 that some people who retire from big businesses get. I just don't think our residents can afford it. And I think they all want, many of them will want and need to have some kind of, even the septic one bothered me too, will need to have something done, and it's too much money. It's too much asking them to pay this.
Let me comment on the septic one. What we found out on the septic one was previously we'd required people to furnish the estimate for the septic cost. The escrow was 125%. What we're finding out, not in all cases, but in some cases, people were getting some lowball estimates on septics that they didn't even intend to use to generate what their escrow fee would be.
Well, that makes sense. I'll take that one back too, but still not the CUPs and the IUPs and the variances. I think they're all too much. Can we table this and I come up and talk to you about each one of these? Because there's a lot, and this is such small print, I'm like, can't even read it. I'm sorry.
The reason that we would
I
like to
have
get these
notes, but-
adopted prior to the first of the year, if it's council's desire, we can table it and bring it back up at the next meeting.
You can always make a motion to table.
All right, I'll make a motion to table.
Is there a second to the motion? I'll second that motion. Discussion. If this is tabled, you'll talk to Jack in the next 2 weeks? Meet with him?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Could you give a general idea what the quantity of, how many are you?
Well, it's, whether it's
Just
one
about
or
everyone
another.
that deals with a private
Okay.
residence. I'm not
Okay.
talking about the construction, building businesses or homes
Okay.
or new homes or something. That's
Thank you,
fine.
thank you.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, the only issue I have, Steve, is I don't want this to see to get this into general levy. Like I said, you were talking about the user fees, they should be paying for it, and not the rest of us. So if these fees go too low, I'm not gonna support anything. I don't want anything on a general levy.
Well, I'm not saying reduce anything. I'm just talking about.
Well, you're saying the costs are
increases.
too high, so that must
Well,
mean,
I think what Suzanne's looking for is some time to sit down, understand these a little better, and if for specific items you want to discuss, we'll discuss it next council meeting.
Yes.
But
that would be
specific
fine.
items,
Yes.
line items, okay. So, because we have to pass a fee schedule next meeting, so. All right, any further discussion? To the motion to table, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Item 7G2, proposed city meeting date schedule. City council annually adopts a resolution setting the meeting dates for city council, EDA, planning, road, and parks commissions. This calendar is approved in advance of the year-end 2019 to establish the schedule beginning January 1st, 2020. Resolution 2019-64, exhibited as Attachment 1, provides the proposed schedule. Staff requests City Council consider approval of Resolution 2019-64, setting the 2020 city meeting dates.
Move for adoption of resolution number 2019-64, setting city meeting dates for 2020.
Second.
Motion made, second, discussion. Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
Item 7G3, authorization of activation of social media sites. City Council approved a social media account policy and a Facebook, YouTube, and Nextdoor's platforms for city presence on social media at their November 25th, 2019 meeting. Staff was directed by council to recommend launch dates for these sites. The recommendation item of this report lists those dates. Staff requests City Council consider approval of account activation for YouTube on December 10th, 2019, Facebook on December 16th, 2019, and Nextdoor on January 2nd, 2020.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the account activation for YouTube, Facebook, and Nextdoor. Do I need to say the dates?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made, second, discussion.
Did we come up with how this is applied? I don't recall if there was a conclusive as far as, as far as council counts.
Did we
I
not
thought that was
approve
an
that last meeting?
We did, in that there was to be essentially, at this time, no comments from council members, and the issue of accounts for this were kind of left up in the air too, till we got a little bit more experience in this, but that was what was listed in the policy that we approved at the last meeting.
That's my recollection.
Is there any significance to having these dates juggled?
The reason, number one, YouTube can be activated very quickly. Facebook was gonna take about a day, so we just figured we'd take it on Monday. Nextdoor is gonna take a couple of days, but due to the fact that we'll have some holiday time in there, we thought we might want
Okay.
to be back full-time before that one went live.
All right, just curious.
I have a question of something that wasn't discussed. I know we can't council's not making comments on any of these, but my question is, public comments, but what about private messaging a person? So say somebody says something about me, and on Facebook or Nextdoor, YouTube I'm not worried about. What if I would want to private message them and ask them a question like, what are you talking about, or go into further detail or something? Is that considered part of this? Council is not making any public comment, or do the private comments?
That wouldn't be a council response, that would be an individual response, and if it related to a city matter, as long as you use that disclaimer and identified yourself as a city council member and state that these opinions did not reflect those of city council, then I think that covers the situation.
Okay,
Well, I think you're talking private message though, so
Yeah,
you're not,
private message.
you're not responding to a comment on a social media site. You're-
right.
You're
I'm
going
clicking on
outside
their
of that.
name and going
Okay.
behind there. And I just want to make sure, because if somebody accused me of doing something, I would maybe want to go in there
Sure.
and put my reasoning behind it, or, might defend myself.
Chris, you want to add something?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And Mr. Mayor and council members, I wanted to add a little bit to the conversation we had last time about council members' use of their private accounts and what implications that would have with the Government Data Practices Act. For example, is use of your private account ever public data, government data? in this case. And I've found an opinion from the Department of Administration that indicates that a council member's private account, even when used to comment on public issues, is not public data. That's not something that's, excuse me, not public data, it's not government data. So it's not something that's preserved or has to be preserved by the city to make a data practices request, or has to be provided by the city or maintained by the city at any time. I know we had a specific question about whether or not you'd ever have to screenshot, for example, a conversation you had in order to do preservations or things like that. If it's not an account managed by the city, it's not government data. So as far as use of private accounts, that's not government data, that's not maintained by the city.
Now, I asked at one of the last discussions on this, if somebody puts their name, council member, identifies himself as a government official, that's different from just
It would be
Tom and Tim.
It would be different if the city was maintaining your account. Under the policy, as I read it, the only person who might have, it might pertain differently to is perhaps the mayor, since the mayor is listed as an administrator for the count under the policy. But as far as, private account statements that you would make, that would not be considered government data. As far as the Data Practices Act is concerned, it's a statement of your opinion. It'd be encouraged to use the disclaimer that Mr. Davis was talking about, and then that's in the policy, but it doesn't trigger any implications about the city having to collect that and keep it in order to be responsive.
I'm kind of thinking the mayor is a public figure as far as the city goes. The rest of us aren't. So if I put my name and a title to it, East Bethel, such and such, that's a formal statement. It's not a
It wouldn't be
kidding
a,
around.
Councilmember, it wouldn't be a formal statement in the sense that it's not made from the city. It's your account's not run by the city. It's not on a city account. It would just be a statement of your position, and consistent with city policy, it should include a disclaimer that's in the city policy as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. To the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. On the staff reports.
I have nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Council reports. Randy.
I did attend a meeting for the League of Minnesota Cities on December 3rd. That was at the Ramsey City Hall, which was very nice, by the way. Primarily was discussed was their insurance for cities and how well they were doing, and to make sure that if we have any issues pertaining to any legal fees or any issues that we're having issues with, to make sure that we contact the League of Minnesota Cities, because they may have an answer that we may not even think that they would cover. There was a lot of discussion between a lot of the different mayors from the different cities about social media. That was a big topic, like we were discussing this evening. They all had some comments about how they deal with social media. It was pretty unanimous that most councils do not comment on social media sites as official pages. That doesn't necessarily mean that some of them do not do so as a personal issue. There was also a lot of discussion about PTSD. They're having a new employee starting in January. who will be able to help us if we have any members of our emergency services who may need that type of service, to give them a call, and they will be able to help us out in that matter. And they are also going to be doing some reconstruction on their building starting next year. So they're going to redo the whole building and make it a little more user-friendly for anyone who visits downtown St. Paul. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Suzanne?
I don't have any meetings that I've attended because mine have all been canceled for December. But I do want to bring up the email Jack sent about the lady with the container in her yard. I don't know if this is something that we would end up voting on, but I think that I read everything, and I've talked to them, and I think because she's had it for 14 or 15 years and the city council in the past gave her permission to have it, that there should be a way we could grandfather that in. Because they're disabled, they need some kind of a place to put to be able to access it because they can't climb ladders anymore. Stairs are difficult for them. The husband has had the stroke and she's had surgery on her wrist. So I just don't see why we can't just grandfather that in. I don't see what the big problem is with that, and I would like it maybe explained to me if there is a big problem, because we have let people go with ordinances on other things. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Council acted on this, right?
Correct.
Might be easier when you sit down with Jack on the fee schedules. Maybe Jack can explain the history. There's a bit of history in this parcel, so rather than rehash it all tonight. Is that okay with you? Or do you?
It's
Want
all
to
right with
discuss it?
me.
Anything else?
That's all.
Tom?
I don't have anything at this time.
Tim?
Fire department meeting this morning, they did a walkthrough at East Bethel Apartments to kind of get familiarized. And then January and February, they're gonna do Cedar Creek 1 month and Camden Hills 1 month. And I don't like this one. They set a new record today with the 4 calls. They're up to 683, but I'm sure that number's just gonna keep going every year, so. That's
A
all
couple of those calls, they look like they're related to snow shoveling, so
yeah.
watch yourselves out
Yeah.
there. So I thought about that today.
Yeah, and that's all I've got.
And I do not have anything tonight. So.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Our meeting's adjourned. Thank you.